This is VK6ARN, Newswest. We are a community organisation and we've been serving up the best amateur radio news in Australia since 1931. Hi there, it's Clinton, VK6FCRC, and welcome to Newswest for the 9th of February 2025. Now on with the show.
Have you got your tickets in the Peel Amateur Radio Group's 2025 Mega Raffle yet? There are 9 prizes valued from $2,000. Details at www.parg.org.u. The annual Peel Amateur Radio Group Swap Meet will be held at the Mandurah Bowling Club starting 9th a.m. on Saturday, 15th February. Door prizes valued from $200 each. This is the biggest annual amateur radio event south of the river. The Mega Raffle will be drawn at 12 noon. It is the biggest amateur radio raffle in Western Australia. You can go to the PARG website for details, www.parg.org.au. Again, www.parg.org.au.
Most Australians older than 50 would have heard of the School of the Air and the RFDS Traeger pedal radio. Prior to the advent of the Elf Traeger pedal radio in the late 1920s, anyone living in the outback had no immediate communications outside the homestead. Stations would teach their own children, or hire a live-in teacher or governess, and professional medical help was often days of travelling away. Traeger was born at Glenlee near Dimboola, Victoria, and raised near Adelaide, South Australia, the son of South Australian-born parents. His paternal grandparents had been German migrants to the young colony in 1848. At the age of 12, he built a telephone from the farmhouse to a shed, making all of the components himself. He built his own radio transmitter before graduation from college. Around 1923, Traeger joined Hannon Brothers, repairing motor vehicle generators and other electrical goods. He developed an interest in radio and obtained an amateur radio operator's license and built his first pedal transmitter receiver. On the subject of amateur radio, where much of the earlier discoveries in radio technology occurred, it's worth noting that in the 1920s, and in fact right through to the mid-60s, amateur radio operators built their own transceivers from scratch, or after the 2 World Wars from repurposed military equipment. In the early stages of radio technology, most communications was carried out using Morse code transmission, a manually generated and received code consisting of dots and dashes representing individual letters, sent at speeds varying from as slow as 5 words a minute to 50 plus words a minute from professional operators. While this is actually quite an efficient way of communicating, a good Morse operator can send a sentence quicker than most people can send a text or SMS. It does take considerable practice to become proficient and not something for the faint-hearted. In 1925, Reverend John Flynn, who had started the RFDS, had heard that Elf Traeger had a pedal-powered generator powering his ham radio and had visited Elf Traeger's workshop and purchased it. In 1926, Elf Traeger, together with a broadcast radio engineer, Harry Corper, worked with John Flynn to develop a cheap pedal-powered radio that could be purchased by most stations and used to communicate with the RFDS. The first pedal sets were introduced in Queensland in 1929, which had an immediate impact on the isolation felt by people living in remote places. In 1933, Traeger invented a typewriter Morse keyboard as an accessory to the pedal sets, widely used before the invention of telephony. Over time, emergency call systems linked country dwellers with hospitals, and sets were used by the School of the Air, doctors, ambulances, councils, taxis, airlines and ships. The same concept was expanded to the School of the Air, which is uniquely Australian and one of the most iconically known aspects of our country outside of Australia. Traeger later developed a voice-capable transceiver, and the generators were replaced with batteries. He also went on to establish his own transceiver business, Traeger Communications, which was formed in 1937 and continues to manufacture transceivers until Elf's death in 1980. As a side note, I started my career in electronics in 1983, and in the mid-90s I was still working on the occasional Traeger radio. Other companies around Australia continued to manufacture the same transceiver under different brands into the late 90s. The earliest Traeger radios had a transmit power of just 1 to 1.5 watts. To put this in perspective, your average CB radio in a vehicle today is 5 watts, and all of the current models of commercial HF radios transmit at 100 watts. Over time, the radios were improved by having additional frequencies, a nighttime and a daytime channel, which also provided a level of redundancy. They had 2 separate transmitters. And 1936 saw the first AM voice radios, but still only at 1 to 1.5 watts. By the end of the Second World War in 1945, more modern radios were developed with outputs of up to 20 watts, allowing base stations in towns to receive much more effectively, and with voice communications now being commonplace, the use of radios became much more widespread. The 1950s brought specialised models of radios suited for the School of the Air, and the first radios designed for use in a vehicle. In the late 50s, another big name in HF radio, also based in Adelaide, commenced operation, later becoming the iconic brand Codan. Codan radios are still in use to this day in most WA police vehicles and outside of Perth, as well as many vehicles used by DFS. They are also a major supplier of radios to the United Nations and many aid agencies. So, where is HF in our landscape now? In the early 90s, most RFDS organisations in Australia abandoned the use of HF as more stations became connected to the outside world with either carrier-based phone networks or satellite-based technologies. Prior to this, the local RFDS base would take messages and receive orders for local businesses from stations, and along with School of the Air, was central to life in the outback. The late 90s brought affordable satellite phones and services to the non-military sector. Military had been using satellite comms for a decade beforehand. The early 2000s brought satellite-borne internet to the entire country, and HF, as a technology used for outback communications, began to decline. Many government agencies with more itinerant need for remote area communications migrated to satellite phones. Even large users such as WA Police, the largest fleet of HF radios in the country, only use them as backup to satellite phones. The UN, on the other hand, continues to use HF heavily and has led to some very interesting innovations in this sector, including the use of HF for basic data communications, vehicle location, and the use of digital voice. School of the Air replaced HF radio with satellite or public carrier-based video conferencing solutions, which provided an experience much closer to a normal classroom for students in the outback. Where interest in HF has increased is within the hobby of amateur or ham radio, which is used by hobbyists throughout the world, as well as with people who just wanted access to a communication system that is independent of other infrastructure. This is based on a theory that if we became a part of a large conflict, much of our public communications infrastructure could become non-operational very quickly. There's also a number of commercial-based HF radio networks which have taken over from RFDS-run services, allowing less technical operators to be able to make radio telephone calls, send position reports, basic text messages by either email or SMS, and to access radio nets run by the same organisations. These organisations are all run by clubs or charities and still quite popular for grey nomads in particular.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
On Tuesday afternoons and evenings, the 40 and 80 metre bands come alive with the sound of slow CW. Who would have thought that this ancient art, which some say was once such a dreaded part of the amateur licence test, would become so popular in these days of modern communications? The uncontrolled net is run in designated portions of the two bands to encourage new CW operators to have a go at slow CW in a safe and really friendly environment. Slow speed and lots of mistakes are par for the course. It's all about having a go, starting with a basic call sign and RST exchange, then over time getting better and better. The net also attracts its fair share of old-timers who enjoy helping others to have a go or to just enjoy the banter. The CQ-QRS net started in Western Australia 3 years ago and has been running every single Tuesday and has been unbelievably popular. The net runs from 3 p.m. until about 7 p.m. on 40 metres, then moves to 80 metres, and we've had up to 60 stations on air having a go. And who knows how many listeners are out there every Tuesday as well. So the CQ-QRS net is on 40 metres between 0700 Zulu and 1100 Zulu, that is 3 p.m. until 7 p.m, and is held between 7020 and 7040 kHz. Then between 0900 Zulu and 1300 Zulu, which is 5 p.m. until 9 p.m, we're on between 3540 and 3570 kHz every Tuesday. There's no net control, so when you're ready to have a go, just find a quiet spot and start calling CQ-QRS at about 75% of the speed you can copy. Most stations will match your speed, so go slow until you're really comfortable with CW. So this might be just the opportunity you've been waiting for to have a go at transmitting on CW, or perhaps just to stop the contacts rusting up on your key. Doesn't matter whether you're brand new to the code, or if you're an old-timer who would like to have a bit of fun and help encourage new operators by having simple, safe QSOs at their speed. We'd love to have you join in. Too much switch mode power supply hash on 80 metres? This might be the incentive to do something about it. With a cheap noise canceller costing less than $100, 80 metres could be easier than you think. So again, the net starts at 3 p.m. every Tuesday above the DX segment on 40 metres between 7020 and 7040. Then, after 7 p.m, moves to 80 metres between 3540 and 3570 kHz. There are usually stations in the west, east and in between listening out for your CQ-QRS call. For more information and to receive our free weekly CQ-QRS RagTune newsletter, contact me, Mark, VK6QI, via the email on qrz.com, or you can use our address cqqrsnet@gmail.com. That is cqqrsnet@gmail.com, and I'll be pleased to have a chat.
Hi, just a little note about VK6RRG and the WAG Technical and General Net. Having it run every Sunday morning on VK6RLM, that's 146.750, or Channel 3 in the old money. And it starts at 10:30 a.m. this morning. Of course, if you're listening in the evening, it's next week.
Hello from the WAVHF Group Incorporated. Are there any amateurs out there with Dutch heritage or friends? This will interest you. Operations Manna and Chowhound. At the close of World War II, the Netherlands had been particularly hard hit by starvation. Lancaster bomber squadrons began to drop food relief packages as Operation Manna in association with the American Operation Chowhound. The WAVHF Group at Wireless Hill wants to commemorate this humanitarian food drop of 80 years ago. So this coming Anzac weekend, the 25th, 26th and 27th of April, use our special event call sign VK80MAN, that's Victor Kilo 80 Mike Alpha November. Worldwide there are also GB80MAN and PH80MAN to listen out for. Look up those call signs on qrz.com. There's some excellent information and pictures there. And for any more information, get in touch with Club Vice President Robert, VK6WHO, our champion for this event in VK. Those call signs again, VK80MAN, GB80MAN and PH80MAN. Thank you for listening to this contribution from the WAVHF Group Incorporated.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. As you might recall, recently I stumbled on an excellent list of 52 weekly challenges put together by Fabian, Delta Juliet 5 Charlie Whiskey and Friends. You can find it at hamchallenge.org. As I've previously mentioned, it contains activities right across the amateur spectrum, from designing a QSL card to making a contact on 80 metres or 160 metres, with everything in between. It's an excellent tool to set a weekly goal to achieve, and I recommend that you have a go. It's not the only interesting tool around. Amal, Victor Uniform 3, Foxtrot Tango Hotel, and Steph Piper, whom you might know as Maker Queen AU, have put together an amateur radio skill tree. It's a collection of hexagonal tiles, each with a skill, displayed together in an attempt to track what you know and could know about amateur radio. The idea is that you print it out and colour in each tile as you complete it. You'll find things like explore D-Star, build a CW key, teach a friend about amateur radio, and plenty more. Can you get 4 activities in a row, and which skills could do with more effort? There are 68 tiles ready for your colouring pencil. Bingo! The Radio Amateur Training, Planning and Activities Committee, better known as the Rat Pack, put together an amateur radio challenge checklist for 2025 and published it on mastodon.radio. It's a list of bands, modes, activities, builds and clubs that help you track what you've been up to throughout the year. While we're here, I should mention that the Rat Pack, in their words, comprises amateur radio operators of a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences, and hosts 2 weekly Zoom meetings so anyone can participate in the talks published on the ratpack.us website. If you're unable to attend, you'll find the presentation on YouTube. Over the years I've been part of this amazing hobby, I've been telling anyone who will listen that there is plenty to do and see in our community, 1,000 hobbies in one. The tools I've mentioned represent around 150 activities and pursuits, but hidden behind each one is plenty to explore. For example, Ham Challenge asks you to spend week 21 creating a GNU radio flow graph. That topic alone could fill a decade worth of exploration if you were so inclined. Similarly, one of the skill tree tiles is Study RF Propagation, something which you might realise is easier said than done. The Rat Pack checklist has a tick box for Work 100 countries, not something you're likely to achieve in an afternoon. My point is, you can do as much or as little of this as you like, to whatever degree floats your boat. As you might know, I'm deep in the weeds with GNU Radio, and I expect to stay there for plenty of time to come. But you are under no obligation to follow me down the rabbit hole. In other words, it interests me, but it might not do the same for you. One final comment. None of these activities require you to upgrade your license. Well, other than the skill tree tile, upgrade your radio license. You can do most, if not all, of the activities I've shared with any amateur license, and plenty of it can be done without a license at all. So, what are you waiting for? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
Good morning once again, it's Roy, VK6 X-Ray Victor, weather helpline for the 9th of February 2025. Today I have for you an IC7300 ICOM HF and 6 metre transceiver, and a Sierra Papa 38 and an SP38 external speaker, approximately 1 year old and in new condition, with box and manual, asking $1,250. That's an IC7300 by ICOM HF 6 metre, going for $1,250. Phone Chris, VK6 India Oscar November, on 0404 800 446. Again, 0404 800 446, and he'd be very pleased to hear from you, I'm sure. And also today I have the following. I have an IC208 VHF UHF transceiver, great condition, small crack in the glass on the front panel, but the LCD is okay. asking $200 for that. It's an ICOM IC208 VHF UHF transceiver. And give Wayne a call. His telephone number is 0498 110775. 0498 110775. It's Wayne, VK6 Echo Hotel. I also have David still looking for a tablet 6 or higher by Android tablet 6 with 1.5 gigabyte of RAM to run a particular application that he's got. He would like to hear from you if you have on service to your requirement. And would like to sell it to David, VK6 Papa Yankee November, and his phone number is 0450 031 452. 0450 031 452. That's David, VK6 Papa Yankee November. And that's all I have for you. Thank you once again for listening. And 7-3 until next week when I may have some more for you. If you have any items for next week, please contact me. VK6XRayVictor at bigpond.com. It's the only email that works at the moment. Please give me a call. 7-3.
Hi there, it's Clinton, VK6FCRC, back with you. And did you know that Newswest is now on YouTube? Type in youtube.com/@Newswest weekly podcast --Kilo Zulu 7 Yankee Charlie. Oh, and before I go, I'd like to thank those watching on YouTube or ATV, the readers, and you for listening. I'd also like to thank our team, the broadcasters, and those submitting content each week. Please stand by now for callbacks after the broadcast, or head over to the VK6.net website and fill out the forms so we know how many people are listening each week.